Are you an accountant with a continuing education requirement? You can earn free NASBA-approved CPE for listening to this episode. Just visit earmark.app in your web browser, take a short quiz, and get your certificate.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Fraud, a true crime podcast where the rich get richer, but there is an occasional clawback. I'm Caleb Newquist. Today on the show, Erik Lie. He is the Department Executive Officer, Amelia Tippie Chair in Finance, and Professor at Iowa University's Tippie School of Business. It's a mouthful, but you also might be thinking, okay, who is this guy? And I'll tell you first, he has a new book, and that book is called Catching Cheats, Everyday Forensics to Unmask Business Fraud. It is out now from Barrett Kohler. And wherever you get books, you should be able to find it. Anyway, yes, he's plugging a book, but also Professor Lie has a very fascinating story of his own to tell. And it is that he wrote this paper in the mid-2000s, 2005 to be precise, that questioned the timing of stock option awards for CEOs and other corporate executives. And we talked about the whole story, so I don't want to spoil anything, but we had a very nice conversation, and it'll all become clear very soon if you don't already know the story, because it was obviously, 20 years ago. Anyway, how about a couple of quick reviews, and we'll get right into it. All right. Here we go. I have I'm going to read a couple of reviews from our episode with Becca Latsky of the Corporate Gossip Podcast. And the first one comes from the Earmark app. Rebecca gave it 5 stars and writes, while the format was a bit more conversational than standard episodes, I found it very interesting. Also, the scorned CPA commentary kept me laughing. Yeah, Rebecca, I would say the Becca episode was pretty unique in the sense that we were just shooting the breeze quite a bit, and because we didn't know each other. We had never met, aside from just exchanging email. I'd say that we are kindred spirits, Becca and I, and so we were just getting to know each other and kind of, just having fun. So I'm glad you liked it. Not everybody liked it. In fact, here's a comment from our YouTube channel on that episode. Evidently, this was a Caleb who wrote this one. And he said, I'm sorry I wasted my one free Earmark CPE per week on this because I'm halfway through it and all I've heard is 2 people just rant about politics. I thought this was about corporate tea. If I wanted politics, I'd listen to a political podcast. Sorry, Caleb. I just want fraud CPE for my CFE. Signed, fellow Caleb. But then he followed up with another comment and he said, 1 hour, 7 minutes, 14 seconds. Hey, she actually had some good personal advice. And hey, fellow Caleb, you hung in there, so I'm proud of you. And yes, Becca had great advice. And if you want to hear that advice, you should go listen. But also, if you want corporate tea, you should go listen to Becca's podcast, the Corporate Gossip Podcast, because it's a great podcast, and her and her brother have this great dynamic, and they do great episodes on companies that we really don't cover here. Anyway, thanks to everyone who rates the show, writes reviews, writes in emails, comments on YouTube, wherever you're doing it. Instagram, I've seen a couple comments on Instagram since we've been posting there again. So all that stuff is fun and appreciated. And that does remind me, if you do like YouTube, if you do like Instagram and want to check us out there, that's where, the Instagram is just like reels and whatnot, and but the full episodes are on YouTube if you want to do them on YouTube. So anyway, also, if you need a keynote speaker for a conference or a webinar or something like that on fraud or ethics, email ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com to get more information on pricing and availability, and we can talk about that. Anyway, Dr. Erik Lie of Iowa University. That's my guest. His new book, Catching Cheats, Everyday Forensics to Unmask Business Fraud, is out now. And we had a nice conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. And let's get into it. Here's me and Erik Lie. You grew up in Norway, correct?
That's right. I had my
Okay.
whole childhood there.
All right.
Yeah.
And so how was that?
Oh, it was a great childhood. Amazing. I was very happy. Doing all the things that the Norwegian kids do. That is, go outside a lot,
Yeah.
play in the summertime, play in the wintertime. We were close to water, as most people are, with a long coastline. So I spent a lot of time by the water, and yeah, getting up in the mountains in the wintertime to go skiing and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I live in Denver, and so but I've been
Yeah.
an avid skier since I was pretty young. I think I first went when I was 10, but my kids are getting a super early start. Like they're going to be flying by me any minute. So,
They're
yeah,
blessed.
that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great.
So then, tell me about like your early interest. Like, was finance something that you gravitated towards quick or early on, or was it something that your parents were interested in? Like, how did your kind of interest develop when you were younger?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I've sometimes reflected on that myself, and I'm not sure really. I mean, my dad, he was an engineer, construction engineer. So
Mhm.
for a while, I was thinking I was going to go into engineering, and he was very good at math as well. So I inherited his skills, or at least his interest and talent with math and numbers. My mom was until she retired, was a children's librarian, so she was sort of on the other side of that spectrum. But I gravitated towards these number-oriented topics and fields. But in high school in Norway, you had to specialize a little, and then I just sort of ended up in some of these more econ-oriented classes, and then it's just a set of somewhat random decisions and occurrences after that lead you to where you are, and sometimes again you wonder, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And you can sort of pinpoint these people that you met who made some suggestions and so on, and you realize that yeah, that's really what made it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And so was there something specific because then you came to the US for your undergraduate, is that correct?
Yeah.
And what do you remember how that came about?
Yeah. Well, I had siblings who both were exchange students when they were in high school. So my brother, he was in Pittsburgh, and my sister, she was in Mexico City. And so I didn't have the experience, so I thought I had to go outside also to sort of be a little bit more global.
Yep.
And so that was my jump into to that world. And at the time, and still is the case, higher education in Norway is free. I mean, you still have to pay for room and boarding and all that kind of stuff,
Yep.
but there's no tuition payment. And they also said that if you go abroad, to make it fair, given that this is taxpayer money,
Yep.
we will pay for tuition as well. So, and then the Norwegian government had made a list of about 20 schools in the US that they said they would fully fund if you go there. So you can probably get funding from other schools as well, but you don't have to go through the additional bureaucracy of fixing this yourself.
Yep.
And on that list was Oregon. I didn't know anything about Oregon at the time.
Yeah.
This was before the internet too, so I can just look it up and look at all the pictures and all that.
Sure.
But I chose Oregon. Actually, I applied to several schools. I applied to Oregon. I applied to Michigan, and I think I applied to Colorado as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think I was admitted to several of these. And then again, it was a random choice. I didn't know, for example, that Michigan has a better academic reputation than Oregon.
Sure.
So I had no idea. And but then I ended up at Oregon, and there were quite a few other Norwegians there as well. So it
Oh
was a
yeah.
nice international community there. It was a splendid place to be. And then I
Oh my
found
gosh,
that, hey,
Eugene is
oh,
amazing. It's so nice
amazing,
there. Yeah.
amazing. It fit me perfectly. You see a lot of the same nature,
Yep.
the same type of trees, a little hilly around there as long as you get away from the valley,
Yep.
and close to the water. It was an amazing place to be.
Great.
Yeah, and that's where I started to meet some people also. I mean, I was happy with my classes, and there was one particular PhD student who was teaching in the investments class, a guy called Scott Lee. He's retired now, and I guess, recognized some of my talent and asked me to do some work for him for his PhD defense, or for his PhD dissertation, really. And so I did that very happily. Got to know him a little better. Started to play squash with him also.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm not the morning guy. He liked to play squash in the morning, so I had to get up early to play squash with this guy. But still, I felt honored to sort of establish these networks and so on. And then he kind of nudged me along and said, "Hey, Erik, I'm in this program, and I think you should do it as well." And so that's, again, one of these chance encounters and discussions that lead me to discussions that I don't think I had sort of the confidence to think of myself as a future faculty member or professor at the time. So yeah. So
the interest in academia that came to you early on.
Yeah, it came to me from other people. I loved the academic environment, I had to say. Okay. I mean, being at the Oregon and being on campus there and in those old buildings, going to the old library there, the night library. Loved it. The smell of the old wood there. Yeah. All that was great. Yeah. So I loved the academic setting, and the idea of actually being able to be part of that for life. That was pretty enticing.
So there was nothing about when you're sitting in your finance classes and they're talking about banking and all of these career possibilities, like did that ever appeal to you as a young person?
Yeah, I liked the finance classes a lot. Yep. But it wasn't really anything more than that. I mean, I hear students now who sort of have this vision for the whole career.
Yes.
And know what they're going to do. Even people who apply to our PhD program and say, yeah, I'm interested in this and I'm going to study this or that. I had no idea. I just liked the classes. I liked the topic, and I applied, and I just liked to ride that wave, and I saw where that took me. So I was sort of just curious, taking it all in, and without having that sort of clear path.
Yeah. Any topics in particular that you remember that were attractive to you in those days? Like, do you had some early interests that kind of were like, oh, I could dive deep into this topic or that topic?
Yeah, well, we had several faculty members at Oregon in those days, who, including the PhD student, Scott Lie, who were very interested in corporate finance topics. Mm-hmm. So I got quite a bit of exposure to even some of their research. So it was more on payout policy and some of these recapitalizations where companies restructure. And I also bumped into some of these agency conflicts, the idea that you have these managers with separate interest who might be doing something that's not in the interest of shareholders. So seeing some of that tension come to light was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. And so, okay, so then you're going down the academic path, and my guess is lots of our listeners don't necessarily have a ton of experience with what that's like. So you do the master's program at Oregon, right? And then eventually you go on to obtain a PhD. And just as briefly as you can, like, how does somebody make that transition? Do you have to have an idea going into that? It's like, oh, this is something I really want to specialize in, or this is something that I'm really interested in studying about or gathering data about. Like, what is that like?
Well, I didn't have any idea. I just thought that I was curious. It was my curiosity that was driving me, but it wasn't for a particular topic at the time. So I was just going to some of the faculty members at Oregon and asking for advice. And they gave me a list of schools that I should apply to that sort of seemed to fit sort of what maybe I might want to study. And then I went with that. And then I went back to serve in the Norwegian Navy for a year. Okay. And at the same time, I was taking some of these standardized tests that you need. Well, I had taken some of them earlier, but I hadn't really put in the effort. So now I need to put in some more effort to be admitted to some of the better programs out there.
Yep.
And so, yeah, so that was me. But as I said earlier, there are other people who come in with some idea of what they want to do. But what I oftentimes tell them is just, forget about what you already know. In the first couple of years in the PhD program, just soak up knowledge, read papers, we'll discuss papers together, because out of those discussions, you'll sort of get to the edge of where we are in terms of our research, and you'll get some ideas of what you can do. Because if you think that you know before you enter the PhD program what is useful to study,
Mm-hmm.
well, you don't. So just forget all of it. It's sort of like
Yeah.
when I first played ping pong as a kid,
Yeah.
showing up the very first time. The coach said, "Who has played ping pong already?" And some of them were raising their hands and saying, "Yeah, I have." And he said, "Well, too bad, too bad. Because I want to start from scratch. So we get all the habits in place, hold the racket properly, and so on." I think the same thing applies to the PhD program. It's okay if you just sort of have this basic knowledge about statistics and finance, and we'll take care of things from there.
Okay. Very interesting. And ultimately, what was your dissertation when you got to that stage?
Yeah, my dissertation was on share repurchases.
Okay.
And it was influenced by we had a speaker from Ohio State came in with a theoretical paper, and I was just sitting there and thinking I had some ideas of how I could test this empirically. And so that's how I started to do this. And I started to gather data, start to read proxy statements and all these things, and that's how I got going. And I didn't really have a clear path. I had some ideas for what I was going to test, but for the most part at that point, I just sort of started to become an expert, or I started to educate myself, to put it that way.
Okay. And so then in terms of like transfer, or excuse me, kind of evolving from the PhD program into looking for professor jobs, like what happened there? Like what happened at that point?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting market. You just there's a market that opens up where we have a couple of academic conferences where everyone's showing up.
Mm-hmm.
In the old days, it was everyone showing up physically, and then
Yes,
conduct
of
all these
course.
interviews in the hotel rooms, and these
Yep.
sometimes small hotel rooms, and sometimes you're stuck sitting on the bed or something. So it's kind of awkward. But that's the process. So you apply to all these positions. You have this initial round of hotel interviews, and then you're invited to campus maybe,
Yep.
and then you get to see that, and you present it to all the faculty. You get to present your research, which is really your job pitch, your research. That's all that
Right.
people care about. I tell my students that the PhD students that yeah, I'm going to give you a grade in this class, but no one could care less. No one's going to look at the grade ever again.
Yeah.
The only thing that people care about is your research and how you present yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah,
that's excellent advice. I mean, it's good advice. That's good advice for pretty well. I mean, not necessarily the research. Not everybody does research for a living, but how you present yourself is definitely that counts for a lot.
yeah.
So,
And it
okay,
also
so
frees
very
up
good.
time to be curious. Instead of
Of
focusing
course,
on doing
yeah.
well in
Mm-hmm.
classes, you can just sit back and you can think freely and think about what it is that you
I
want to do.
remember that takes me back to even my own college days where I had an auditing professor. I studied accounting. And then I got away from accounting, but I had an auditing professor in my undergrad program who said, if you don't learn anything in here, he said, that's fine. My job is to teach you how to think. And like, I don't know, I've been carrying that ever since. And he only said it like once or twice. And I don't know, it just landed with me. He's like, my job is to teach you how to think. And he was tough. Like he taught intermediate accounting, so he had to weed out the people who he didn't think were ready. So interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
and then so you end up in Iowa right away. Is that right?
No, I went to the College of William and Mary first. That was my
Oh,
first
okay,
job.
very good. In
Yeah,
Virginia.
and yeah. And then after spending 8 years here, great years,
Yeah.
I was reaching out and getting to an institution that is I guess the difference between William and Mary here is that they focus a little bit more on research here. They have a little high expectations for the research that you do, and they also have a PhD program, which is very nice.
Right.
Especially as you age and your energy goes down, and you need that constant input and so on. So to be able to sort of be surrounded by students, PhD students,
Right.
is a nice benefit.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so thanks for all that. Thanks for indulging me. So we want people to buy the book, but also we also want to hear your version of I guess, your whistleblower story. This is something that, you write about it in the book, and this is how you kind of became well known. And although it's so interesting because it was over 20 years ago now, or about 20 years ago now. So I'm wondering if you can take us back to that time, those early 2000s, or around the time that backdating was something that, was it something, again, when did that particular topic or area of interest, when did that kind of first emerge for you?
Yeah, I guess it was, again, like other things in my life, it just sort of comes to me. And this matter of seizing those opportunities. And at the time, people start to look more at executive compensation issues. And we had acquired a database. All this executive compensation data comes from either proxy statements, which companies have to send out to the shareholders. It's essentially the invitation to the shareholder meeting. And in there, they say, these are the board members, and these are the people who will be nominated for the board, and here's some information about them. And by the way, here's also our executive team, and here's how they're being compensated, and so on. And some of this information has to be disclosed by law. So then there are companies that will go out there and gather that information. Back in the days, it would be all by hand. These days, you can scrape it, I guess.
Yep.
And so we bought this database with this information from the largest 1,500 companies in the US. And so then my initial thing was, again, tied to some of the stuff that I talked about earlier with share repurchases and corporate financial policy and so on. I was thinking that, when you give these executives some incentives, how's it going to change the behavior and how is it going to play out in the firm? And there were several other papers that did similar things back then. So that was my initial thing. So as part of that, go ahead, Caleb.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, at this point in time, was equity compensation, was that historically, has that always been a big part of corporate executives about compensation, or did it really start amping up in the 1990s and the 2000s? Did it really get turbocharged at that time, or was it always kind of a big part of it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that always come up here and there. Of course, we hear about the executives being paid a lot.
Yes.
And we'll discuss it by that. And if you go back to the early 90s, the politicians were also periodically disgusted by this. And so at some point back in 1993, they said, okay, you guys, the firms that is, you guys can pay your executives well, but you're not going to be able to get tax deductions for everything that you pay them.
Right.
Because that's essentially subsidy from the taxpayers.
Right.
But then they had a little loophole that said, if it's performance-based, which we are okay with, meaning if you give them some stock or some options on stock, then we're okay with it. And then you can deduct that. So what happened then, of course, is that the executives were saying, hey, let's just move some compensation towards some of this performance-based stuff.
Yeah.
So that was the politicians doing. So there was attention to it then, and then people start to use options more frequently. So it's I guess probably going back to the early days, we've had some fascination for it. We love to focus on some of the wealthy people in society and how much they make and so on.
It is kind of like a palace intrigue or kind of some kind of fascination, but by the same token, it does hold rich and powerful people accountable in a way that that fascination kind of leads to, is like, oh, is this fair, or is making these comparisons, like the comparison of what the median worker at a corporation makes versus the top executives. And so those things I think they kind of serve as an area of fascination, but as an area of accountability too.
Yeah, and it's interesting that ratio that you talked about now.
Yeah,
that is actually now that has to be disclosed in the proxy statement,
right.
and only for the last several years, what we call the pay ratio. And whenever these pay ratios come out, of course, the media is going to be on top of it.
Yes,
and they're going to say, look at this guy's pay ratios in the hundreds or whatever. And at the same time, the companies are trying to do what they can to tweak the number for the median compensation within the company. Do we count these people? Can we include some of these delivery people and so on?
Yeah.
Or should we exclude them because they're paid so little? So that so that game's being played because of the media attention. So the fascination has always been there.
All right. Okay, so you have this data set and you're starting to look at and like you said, you're trying to understand how this form of compensation, does it manifest in any kind of interesting behavior one way or another, right?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, if you give people options, I'm not sure how much you know about these stock options, but they give you the opportunity to buy stock in the future. At a certain price, and that price at which you can buy in the future is usually set to be the market price of the stock on the day that you get the options.
Right.
And one thing that is interesting about this is that you have this kinky payoff that is you're only going to be paid off if the stock price goes up.
Right.
If it goes down, it doesn't matter how much it goes down because you couldn't kill us. They're already out of the money. You already lost, so that's fine. So that is symmetry there. It gives the incentive to pump up the volatility of the stock. You don't want the stock price to be constant because then they're not going to pay off.
Right.
You want it to be a wild ride in the stock price. That's going to make your options more worthwhile. So my thinking and the field's thinking at the time was, you give these people options, they're going to be more volatile in the behavior. They're going to do crazy things for the firm. And so we should be able to see that. So, but as part of that exercise, I looked to see what happened to the stock price around the grant itself.
Yep.
And I wasn't the first one to do that. A guy at NYU, David Earmark, had done that about a decade earlier and published that in a very, very nice article in the Journal of Finance. But he had used data that was from the early 90s. And while there was some action then in terms of backdating, it wasn't that pronounced. So what he found was that the stock price, increases a little after these grants. So what he said was that it appears as if these executives are granting themselves options before they think the stock is going to increase in value. So it was interesting. It got the attention, but it wasn't explosive.
Right.
So I essentially just did exactly what he did with more recent data from the late 90s and the beginning of current century. And I just saw that whatever pattern he had, it had intensified. It was crazy strong. You see the stock price during the month beforehand, on average, go down by about 4%.
Right.
And then right on the grant date, it turns and it goes up 4% afterward, on average again. So this is crazy to find something like this. I said, what is going on there?
Yeah, and so like just the level set for the audience, the likelihood, because like the likelihood that all these corporate managers were just extraordinarily lucky, or they had perfect timing, like the likelihood of that being is almost zero, right? Like the odds of that happening are just infinitesimally small. You said the concentration of this is far too great for this to be a coincidence, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both several things. One was Earmark's pattern was concentrated to the period afterward, and so then you can sort of conceivably say that it wasn't a coincidence, but what's happening is that they just kind of can foretell the future to some extent.
Right.
And so we'll give them that. But what I found was that It's very strong after beforehand, and this is important. You not only see it in the stocks themselves, you also see it in the whole marketplace. So the whole market is moving in that same direction, and you ask yourself, how could these guys predict the market?
Yeah.
And how come they're not working for a hedge fund in that case instead of for a
Right.
company out there in the Midwest? So this wasn't adding up.
Right. Okay.
And, yeah.
Okay. And so you have the data, and so then you write the paper. And so I don't want to tell your story. So you submit it to a journal, and they enthusiastically, they're like, amazing, you're a genius. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Or what when you submitted the paper, what happened?
Well, I mean, to be fair to the whole process, when you submit a paper, you get feedback. You oftentimes try the top journals, you get feedback, and then it makes you think about things, and you market it differently, and you think with the results, and you try to pitch it differently. And that was a process where I sort of got more and more certain about how to pitch it and what was going on. So
Okay.
that the referee process really helped me create a product that was sellable.
Yeah.
And I got that out to a good journal, and then nothing really happened. It was accepted.
Yep.
Clearly, someone thought it was interesting, and then nothing happened. People will not read these academic journals for the most part, right?
Yeah.
I think they're better these days, but for the most part, no one cares about these things. So
I just have to, you'll appreciate that. I have a friend who's an economist and went through this whole process, and she and I I don't know, I was always fascinated by her experience, and she would say, there's all these people out there writing these papers that nobody's going to read. And, and it's just part of, it's just the cost of doing business. And so the fact that it didn't get any attention out of the gate didn't surprise you at all.
Oh no, I didn't expect everyone to come to me and say, "Hey, what's going on there?" No, I didn't expect that at all.
Right.
This is the normal for me and for people in academia that nothing happens.
Yeah.
But so it wasn't until I saw an article in the journal, in the Wall Street Journal, talking about what the SEC was doing, and the SEC was going after some company for what they thought was EarmarkCPE old story, which we now call spring loading. This idea that they're essentially granting themselves options before the stock price is going to go up.
Yep.
And so I contacted the SEC, and this is not normal for me either.
Right.
Usually I stay in my bubble. But something compelled me to contact the SEC and just say, hey, I think you're on the wrong path here. I think that this is much more explosive. I think the story is different. I think that what's happening is not that these executives are predicting what's going to happen in the future. I think that what they do is they wait until much later, and then they're able to look back, because at the time you didn't have to disclose this information until much later.
Yeah.
These proxy statements, incidentally, they come out 3-4 months into the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
So they can essentially stand in March of a year and say, hey, we got some grants last year, didn't we? And let's just pick a date to make that the official date. And look at that, June 7th had a very low price. So we'll pick that one and we'll alert our shareholders now in the proxy statement. That was my story. And it was so simple, but at the same time, so crazy. So so that was the story that I pitched in my paper, and I told the SEC. And they got curious. That was nice, because you hear about other stories where the SEC is not paying attention to you. I mean, in the made-up story, I mean, there were all kinds of people who came to the SEC all the time and say, "Hey, look at this! I got all the data here. This guy is playing with your money."
Yeah, he's running a Ponzi scheme. It's it's so funny, because around that time, keep me honest here, but I believe Harry Markopolos, like he was sending letters to the SEC around the same time that you were, and
Yeah.
he couldn't get anyone to talk to him.
Yeah, I think he even had meetings with them, but they didn't
Okay.
quite understand it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But in your case,
my,
their interest was piqued at the SEC when you reached
there was
out.
one lady at least who called me up and asked me, and then she asked me for some of the data. So,
Okay.
what I report and what we always report in these research studies are what's happening at the aggregate level.
Yep.
But I could actually look at individual stocks to see which were seeming to be the culprits, or some repeated this pattern more than others. So I sent her some spreadsheets, and then she thanked me, and then she said she would look into it, and she had some follow-up conversations also. But that was about it, because it's very much a one-way conversation.
Sure.
You don't hear what they're doing, but I got the sense that they were doing something. And then eventually one of the investigations led to something, and that was disclosed in the media.
Yep.
And at that time, I jumped to a second paper to sort of seal the deal, because what I discovered along the way was that Sarbanes-Oxley required executives to file these transactions within a couple of days.
Yep.
This goes back to Ken Lay and so on, because
Right.
Ken Lay, when Enron was in trouble, he would dump his shares, and people are saying afterward, should we know in a timely manner that he's dumping his shares?
Right.
So let's make sure that all his executives, whenever they do this kind of stuff, that they alert everyone else within a couple of days.
Yep.
And let's make that the case for options as well.
Right.
And so that was.
And so can I just want you to clarify one thing for the audience, and so what is the harm, I guess is the word I'll use, but what is the harm about going back and just picking a grant date kind of willy-nilly? Like, what is the harm that's being done?
Yeah, well, that's a very, very good question. Well, the fact that they don't talk about it or disclose that anywhere, that in itself makes us fishy, right?
Of course, right? Yeah.
Suspicious about it. How come he's so secretive about this? How come he's not telling anyone? How come
if it's not a big deal, why not just if it's not a big deal, then why don't we just tell everybody? Right.
Yeah. No, there are actually several reasons for that. One is that the shows themselves, they can go after the company and say, hey, they got screwed. They didn't know. This is not the spirit of the compensation agreement that we have in place.
Yep.
Because the compensation agreement says that, the grant shall be made, and the price in that agreement should be the price on the day of the grant. So this is not the spirit of that agreement at all. So the shareholders can be mad, and therefore they can file suits against the company. Then you have, I told you about earlier, that 1993 law that says that only performance-based compensation can be deducted for tax purposes above a certain level. While in order for it to be deemed performance-based when it's the option pay, you cannot grant the options in the money, because then they've already been sort of given some value. The idea is that you have to fight, you have to earn the money by causing the price to increase.
Yeah, your riches are kind of baked into the offering, or to the grant, excuse me.
Right.
Okay.
So then it becomes a tax issue. Then it's tax
right.
evasion.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Because they get to deduct that from their revenues, and they have a lower net income, and they pay lower tax on lower net income.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And on top of that, you also have some other accounting things. This was, you might remember that this was the dot-com bubble period leading up to the turn of the century. So a lot of these tech companies and so on, and they didn't have money. So they would give the executives a lot of options. And the accountants at the time, they had this rule that for earnings purposes, you could put down the compensation as essentially the difference in value between the stock price and that exercise price of the options on the day of the grant.
Yep.
Which is zero.
Right.
Of course, we know they have value, but the accounting value is zero. And so that was very nice for these companies, because they can give all the executives all these options, and they can claim to people that that is not going to cause a drop in the earnings at all.
Right. It doesn't cost
us anything. It's an accounting scheme. Yeah, so
Right.
the accountants will come on board and say, this is again not in the spirit of what we were thinking about with our laws.
Right.
So yeah, you add up all these things, and it's pretty clear that, and I think just in general also, I think that it's pretty clear that they were trying to fool all these constituents, all the shareholders and so on. They're paying themselves some money on the side. It's very clear.
Yeah. Okay. So the SEC is interested. You send them some data, but like you say, it's a one-way conversation. So kind of what happens next?
Well, that one investigation, and a lot of these SEC investigations, they continue, and the companies do not necessarily have to disclose anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be investigated as a company. It's not in the public domain, and the company can choose as to whether they want to disclose an investigation and what's going on. So it came to the surface that one of these companies were investigated, and the Wall Street Journal wrote about it. And this was a story written by Mark Meermount, one of their really senior, excellent reporters out of the Boston office. And so it was just a story about that one company. And at the time, I teamed up with an old friend of mine, an old colleague that I got to know at Purdue, Randy Heron. And we had been working on a subsequent study where I told Randy that, hey, we need to seal a deal here, because now that the filing lag has been tightened to 2 days, we shouldn't see that much backdating anymore, because they can't backdate. They have to do it within 2 days. So if they comply with this law, which a lot of them didn't, but if they do, we should see this pattern that I uncovered earlier, we should see it disappear. And that would be the final nail in the coffin, that's what's going on.
Yep.
And Randy was on board, and we got the data, and we showed that indeed those that complied with the law was no pattern. For the others, she was still there. And so we reached out to then Mark. It was actually Randy who at the time, who was more eager and more on top of it. He was the one who wrote the email on behalf of us to Mark and his team. And then Mark comes back to me, and I guess maybe because I'd written more of the papers at the time. And then he gets very interested. And I said, there's a whole lot more here.
And journalists love it when you have a lot. They're like, how many stories can I get out of this? Yeah.
So he asked for some data as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, first he wrote up a story about what the research was about, what we had found in academia. And then he followed up and said, hey, now let's dig into the data. What data do you have for us? And so I sent him a spreadsheet again. This was actually where Randy was a little bit more cautious. He said, I'm not sure if we should do this. And I said, yeah, well, no, I'm going to do it.
So I'm curious. So and this is something I've been waiting to ask you about, but like at this point, being a whistleblower, is that even occurring to you? Like that's what you're doing? Because you guys are just academics looking at data and trying to find interesting things. At what point does it ever dawn on you that you're like that you are someone blowing the whistle on inappropriate business behavior?
Yeah. I wasn't thinking of it quite that way. I was thinking that it's really cool that our research actually makes a difference.
Right.
I mean, Randy and I, we had another paper on poison pills, which I used in takeovers. And we actually came to the conclusion that it's poison pills, which have a very bad rep on the street, and the name kind of gives it away too. Because they're actually called shallow rice plants, but on the street they're called poison pills. And so when companies would adopt that, they would sometimes refer to Randy and my research on this, showing that the poison pills aren't all bad. They can be used effectively to raise the price when you're being acquired. And so they would adopt the pill, and they would cite us, and Randy and I would see this in the proxy statements, and we say, hey, this is so cool. We're
Yeah.
sitting in the office, and these big shot companies are citing our work. We actually
Right.
have an influence.
Right. Right.
So it's that feeling of making a difference in this world. So it was more that was really nice to see that people cared about what we're doing.
Right.
And yeah, so Mark was very
So then
interested.
let me just ask you about your research partner, Randy.
Yeah.
Now this is the first time he had expressed any reluctance about sharing some of the information. Do you recall, like, what was he worried about?
Yeah, I think yeah, so he wasn't involved when I first shared this with SEC. I think that he was more concerned about safety issues.
Okay.
Uh, so personal safety issues,
Sure.
that someone will get very upset and
Yeah.
something is going to come back to us.
Yeah. Right.
And
Okay.
I think maybe that's where our cultures differ, also coming from Norway, where any celebrity can go around in the street or go to take the bus or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
You
Yeah.
feel safe. What's going to happen to me,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't really have that concern at all. I wasn't scared at all. I just thought it was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. Like, yeah, a fascinating kind of revelation
Yeah,
of business behavior.
yeah. But
Yeah.
again, Randy was the one who alerted Mark the first time around.
Right.
So
Sure.
clearly
Right.
he was in on it too. He didn't want to maybe take it that far. He didn't want to be us. He would not want to have us to be the ones who are actually pointing the fingers at
Right.
individual
Right.
companies.
And that's never, if I understand you correctly, like from what I read in the book and what I've read elsewhere, is like that was never the point for you. It was never about like making examples out of companies or anything. It's just like, this is just what we are finding in the data. This is the phenomenon we've discovered.
Yeah. And of course, with the hope that once we've discovered it, let's find a way to make it cease to happen.
Right.
Some easy regulation or something, which they eventually instituted.
Yeah. And so Mark Merriman at the Wall Street Journal, like, do you recall how many stories did he end up writing about this, and when did it really start to pick up steam?
They worked on that for a long time. He gathered a team. I didn't know at the time. He gathered a team around him, and I think they must have had that data for quite a few months.
Yep.
And I know that during that time, they not only looked at the data, they also gathered some of their own data, and then reached out to several of the companies that appear to be outliers within the data. And of course, all of them would tell them that they had done nothing of the sort.
Right.
And then they wrote up an article, and it was in the Weekend Journal. So it was one of these additional sections to the journal. It was on the front page of that section, with a nice big graphics and so on. So it was about the March. I think it was around spring break. It was a nice day here in Iowa. So that land on my in the mailbox, lots of pretty colors and graphs and all that. And they singled out a handful of companies with graphs for each of them, showing what the stock prices were, when the grants occurred among those stock prices, and then highlighting that time and time again, these grants occurred right at the time when the price was at its lowest. And then talked about also having contact with these companies and what they said and so on. And that got the wheel going. And then they smelled blood even more. And then they had the team just continue on these stories, because I think they realized that this is big. This could give them some recognition as a media outlet.
Right. And I mean, I think what's interesting is that at each phase is the intensity kind of just grows, right? Like for you guys, you're looking at the data, you're writing the papers, and you're drawing conclusions, and you're saying, okay, wow, this is really some cool stuff there. Journalists, they kind of they look at it through a different lens, right? Where they say, oh, this is a story that people need to know.
Yeah.
And then whether or not something is illegal or not, journalists, when they're doing their work, I guess, as I don't want to say objectively, but their job is just to report what they find and say, okay, is based on what we found, is a law being broken, or is a norm being broken, or is this just something that we think needs to be a story that needs to be told in the best interest of the public? And then the next phase is you have prosecutors who decide, we've decided that someone has broken the law here. And so then that's because based on these articles that we've read in the Wall Street Journal or whatever, and there's wrongdoing here, and we're going to hold people criminally accountable. That in and of itself is yet another phase.
Yeah, no, it was a fun period because the journal essentially started a crowd there, and so they could focus in on the companies that they already looked at. They start to see some of these companies do something about it. Internal investigations. In one case, one of the executives was he fled the country very quickly. Wired some money, and then he took off. And it's like, I think it's pretty clear that something is going on.
Yeah. You don't flee the country if things are, if things, everything's by the book. So,
yeah.
And then the SEC is doing investigations at this time as well, too, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything goes hand in hand at that point. And one story after another. And the Wall Street Journal, they could just go down the list of other companies that were further down and that were also clearly involved in this. And again, they can make some of the human stories of these executives and their background and actually how they did it, how it was accomplished in practice, because it varied in practice how they actually did it. So all that was very interesting. And I didn't know how it was actually pulled off, how they did it in practice, what the look back period they used, and whether they had sort of institutionalized that and who was involved and so on. So that was very curious and interesting to me.
And just kind of moving ahead a little bit, ultimately, when prosecutors were bringing criminal charges against some of these executives, it was kind of a mixed bag, right? Like there were some people where they said, yeah, there was criminal intent here and criminal behavior, and they secured convictions. But then there were cases where they were there full acquittals because it was just based on the context and the circumstances of a particular company, where they're like, oh, there was no criminal intent here, so, and juries found some of those executives not guilty. Is that right?
Yeah. I haven't followed very closely the federal criminal cases on this, but they were all kind of handicapped in that, I had all these observations, and that's kind of what the book is about. Also, this idea that with enough data, you can see these patterns, but if you narrow it down to one data point, you can't see what's happening in that context. A few of the companies, if they were repeat offenders, granting options at the lowest price, say 5 years in a row, it's like, yeah, you're giving away, buddy. I mean, it's pretty clear that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Some of them would actually, and then this came out later, some of them would intentionally not pick the lowest because it would seem so obvious.
Right, sure. Mm-hmm.
And so when executives are starting to think ahead that not only going to try to steal some money here, we're going to try to not incriminate ourselves, and we can cover up the evidence and so on, then it's harder for outsiders to prove that they actually did something. Because what you have then is a few cases where they got pretty good timing, but they're going to come back and say, hey, yeah, we got lucky. What can we say? We got lucky. There's a lot of companies out there. There's thousands of companies out there.
Yep.
You look at all of them. There's bound to be some that got lucky, and we got lucky in this case.
We were one of the lucky ones. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So they had a pretty good defense. I would say that in a lot of these lawsuits, they would sell because they didn't want that to surface.
Right.
And some of these lawsuits also had some other incriminating evidence, or you could see that there were connections across the boards of various companies that were involved in this. So there was so you put all this together. But yeah, I think the federal authorities, they had a challenge ahead in getting some of these executives to account.
Right. And remind me around when the prosecutions started to happen, about what year was this? when those started happening?
Oh, so my first study was published in 2005. The Perfect Payday article came out in March 2006.
Okay.
And then it sort of started after that. I know some of the lawsuits started shortly thereafter. I mean, there's a lot of plaintiff lawyers who are,
Yep.
you can call them ambulance chasers or whatever, but at the
Right.
higher level, very
Yeah,
tough level.
corporate ambulance chasers, which is a whole nother deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are trying to figure out who the guys are,
Yep.
and so all this stuff is happening at the same time. And I think they're feeding off each other also. I
Sure.
mean, for
Yeah.
example, the SEC is going to launch a suit, and then the Fed will have their own criminal case. So you have a civil suit, and then on top of that, that's gonna attract the attention of others. So and I didn't have a good. Hey, I was sitting here in my office in Iowa.
You were in Iowa City. That's right.
Yeah, I was reading the media. I was talking to some people, but I couldn't see everything that was happening.
Right. And so I have to ask you, did you experience any pushback from the corporate world? So for example, did companies, was there any, like, well, we're not sending recruiters to the University of Iowa because that's where Erik Lie is, and he did these studies on backdating, and it's making us all look like crooks and this and that. Was there anything like that happening in the wake of all those of everything?
No, nothing like that.
That's good.
I think the university at the time sort of celebrated also. I mean, they get some attention to themselves. It's not like, I mean, we had Caitlin Clark, of course, recently, generating a lot more attention to the university. But but it at least I gave them a little bit of attention, so that was all good. And I think that the attention was possible also, and that we're fighting crooks here. So, so no, and I suspect that to the extent that happened, and it might very well. And we have, for example, United Health up the street in Minnesota. And they were a big sinner in this regard. And it's very possible that some of the recruiters got mad and therefore didn't hire any of our students. But in that case, we wouldn't hear about it.
Right. So. Yeah. Okay. Very good. That's good to know. So I want to ask you about, I guess the easiest way to kind of frame this is, the use of data. Like, data is everywhere now, and it's everywhere in the media. It's everywhere in our lives. It's everywhere in our work. And I think I work for a technology company, and so everyone's always talking about data and what's the data say and this and that and whatever. As someone who's been working with data for a very long time, and I think you were coming at it from an academic's point of view, but do you ever worry, or do you ever see, do you see it being manipulated in kind of this particular era in a way that worries you, that people kind of lose faith in things like data? Because ultimately what you were able to do is you were able to use data to show, it's like, hey, here's something that's happening and it's hurting people, or it's unfair and it's not very transparent, and we should do something about that. Do you ever worry that that's kind of getting lost, where people have less trust in it, or any other concerns?
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. Big question. In some sense, some part of my book is about disclosing people giving bad data, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's sort of what earnings management is about. So showing that clearly the data that they provide it can't be true. But we now live in a world where transparency and opacity is always in conflict. We have Bureau of Labor statistics that when they come up with information that they have been working very hard on, people don't want to leave, and then they're being politicized.
Yep.
So, and we've seen that in other countries also. I remember stories of people working for the official statistics agencies in Greece. They got fired one after another because they didn't provide the statistics that the politicians liked.
Right.
So statistics, they can have a bad rep, and they sometimes deserve that. So it's about making sure that the statistics are correct. So I think we're, for the most part, pretty good about that in academia. and we pay a lot of attention to each other, and to some extent, the referee process about that. These days, we asked oftentimes to supply the data, the underlying data, so they can be verified. So the statistics can be verified. They oftentimes ask for the code, so the code can be verified. So they can run the same code and based on the same data and then get the same results. And they'll ask all kinds of other questions about various tests that you might run or should have run and so on to make sure that the statistics really hold up to that scrutiny. So I think we're very much aware of it, and we know the statistics can be used to lie, and so on. So yeah, it's a huge question, and a lot of people pay attention to that.
Yeah, and it's kind of old hat in academia, actually, because it's, as you say, like so much of it is, especially the empirical nature of it, manipulating it, for your own purposes to kind of show a result, that confirms your bias or whatever it is. That's been around for a while. And I don't know if you said this before we started recording, but the insularity of kind of academia, those kinds of stories haven't really come to the kind of the public's attention until somewhat recently. I'm thinking of like Dan Ariely, for example. The story, that's a big one, right? And it was
also,
right. But as you pointed out, it was other academics who pointed out the problems they saw with those data, and so I think what I've read some people say is like, hey, this is how it's supposed to work. This is how academia is supposed to work. And others people say, oh, this is evidence of how academia is broken. And so there's quite a debate. And it's not surprising that it's contentious really wherever the debate is happening, whether it's in academia or whether it's in the public sphere, that there's contention around it. So
I think it's interesting those examples that you mentioned also there with Dan Ariely and so on, that it's not only about statistics themselves, because I think they were accurate. I think it was underlying data that was flawed, and in those cases also the data was generated by themselves. Or I guess in one of the experiments that Ariely had, it was supposedly getting the insurance data from an outside, but it turned out that the insurance company said, no, this is not the data we provided. So somehow he generated some of his own data. But that whole sector where they run experiments on students and so on, you can do whatever you want, essentially, and you can get the stats you want. So you're not really changing the statistics, but you're changing the responses, underlying responses. So I think we need to do some cleaning on that side. That's not so much happening in finance. Again, we now, for the most part, have to disclose the data, but we also use data sources that come from places that other people can also use to verify. Well, even back when I got my dissertation chair, he said, I don't believe a result until I've seen it the second time.
Right. Replication.
Of course, the problem in academia is that we don't necessarily get to see the second time.
That's right.
Especially if it deviates from the first time.
Right.
Because then you have to prove somehow that the first one was incorrect, and you can't do that unless you have access to all the data and all the methods and so on that they had. So replication and the replication crisis in certain parts of our field. That's serious.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That's like you say. That's a big question.
You got another episode at least right there.
Oh man. Okay. So then the last thing I wanted to ask you about, you have a new book. It came out. We're recording this on October 9th, and I believe this just came out 2 days ago, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So but you've written books before. This isn't your first book, is that right?
Yeah, I've written other books, but the other books have been more toward the pure academic market. At least the first one was very, very academic. The second one is a wealth management book that was written essentially for when I taught wealth management first time. I realized that there wasn't a good book for these MBA students who were taking that class. So I just essentially took all my notes and I tried to to flesh them out a little and made it into a book with some illustrations and so on. So that was, and I was thinking that this is not going to only be useful for the MBA students, it's going to be useful for the whole marketplace. But that's a tough market to deal with, and I didn't have a big marketing campaign or anything like that.
Right.
So this book that I have now, the publisher is more keen on making some. It's a nonprofit, Barry Kohler. There's a mission-driven company, but at the same time, they have to make money on the products to be able to even survive in this cutthroat market. So therefore, I'm hoping to generate some more sales as a result of that.
Yeah, and I have to say, what's that?
I feel it's obligation. In the past, it's only about myself. I mean, you write these papers, they don't succeed, and it's like, you take the fall entirely on your own.
Right.
But in this case, the other people is bet on your horse, and I feel like, okay, I owe it to them now, to show up on these places and mark the book and make it sell.
So I have to tell you, I didn't quite finish it. I'm in the LIBOR chapter, but you have a very easy writing style. As someone who has been writing for a long time now and pays attention to these things, it's a very pleasurable read, very easy. You explained, I think in the part about Enron, that when you explained SPVs and SPEs, that your explanation was about as concise and as clear as anything I've ever read about that. So I highly recommend it for that alone. So kudos to you.
I mean, I tested on people who didn't know finance, so
there you go. Okay, yeah, very good. So yeah, you knew you were doing research on your own audience. So I have to ask, because my producer Zach and I we were talking about this a little bit, but like, there's lots of books out here that are similar to yours in the sense of, oh, this is how you notice when things are fishy or financial true crime. I mean, we do a podcast about it. Yeah. And so I'm just curious, like, who is the intended audience for a book like this? Like, who do you hope picks this up and reads it and learns something from it?
Yeah, I sort of consider it to be a pop science book.
Yeah, right.
So I think it sort of falls in the same category as Freakonomics, where you have a blend of research with stories that are appealing to people.
Yep.
So and that was my vision for this book from the get-go. It wasn't only about telling stories. So, for example, the story about LIBOR is not only about telling the story of LIBOR, which has been told before.
Yep.
But it's also about supplementing with some data. So there's always some graphs or some data that shows that you could see this in the aggregate. And so it's sort of pulling together the storytelling with some data in every single case. And then I also think that there's some stories that have been told at all, like in my salami slicing chapter, the NASBA collision paper or chapter. That to me is a super fascinating case that I don't think people are aware of at all. So there are more stories, there are unknown stories, but it's always mixing that with some clear data where you can see for yourself what's going on.
Yeah.
Even, you talked about Enron earlier. It's not only about telling about Enron, it's about showing some of these graphs.
Yes.
Like their earnings distributions and so on, showing that they clearly these companies are doing something fishy in the aggregate, especially in China. I mean, the graph for China is just out of this world. Where you see that no company in China is in the red. How can it be? Lots of them at zero. But no one is failing.
As someone who is partial to words as opposed to graphs, that graph about the Chinese companies, I was just like, oh gosh, that looks it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And the Luckin Coffee story is, if people don't know that one, it's a fairly recent one, but it's also just a fascinating story. But I was surprised. You know what I learned reading is, like, I did not realize that they had emerged from bankruptcy, that they had successfully reorganized. So anyway,
they've actually started business here, and I think they opened up some shops in New York now. So they're trying to conquer this market. So with the low prices, Starbucks, watch out. I mean, they've taken over the Chinese market,
of course.
And now they're coming here.
Yeah, it's so weird though, but it's like Chinese culture isn't known for coffee, and I'm just surprised that they were able to, like, they were able to take out that they were able to have so much success with a tea culture. It's like trying to sell coffee in trying to sell coffee in Britain. It's like you can, but you're not going to make a fortune anyway.
Yeah, I think it's while they both provide that buzz and that caffeine that we all need.
Yes.
In all fairness, I just think that I can choose coffee or tea, and I've had access to both growing up. I just have a preference, taste-wise, for coffee, and I think that's what it comes down to eventually.
Yep, I think that's probably right. I mean, I've been enjoying the book, and I wish you the best of luck with it. I wanted to also ask you before we wrap. So you ended up, if people haven't had a chance to look into you yet, you ended up as one of the Time 100 influential. I think was it 2007?
Yeah.
And that must have been a surreal thing to have happen to you. Like,
it's crazy.
Like, did you get a phone call? Did you get an email? Like, how does like, is it some intern in the Time Warner building that just said, "Hi, Dr. Lie, is that your," like, I'm just curious what what that was like.
I think I got a phone call first.
Okay.
But I do remember I got a very official invitation to a party. That is probably what stands out the most, because they bring all these people to New York for a big event, and they make this a flashy event, and they take pictures, and they use the pictures for their magazine and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then they bring in all kinds of other celebrities also, and they also bring in sponsors. So they have these for this event. They have a table with a mix of these influential people and the very sponsors. So it's all sort of a marketing gig there.
It's definitely. I mean, that sounds like publishing to me. As somebody who's worked in media, that sounds like. Yeah, that's definitely a publishing gimmick for sure.
But it was interesting.
Probably a great party though.
Yeah, I didn't know first, whether I should go, and people are saying, "No, you should go. You should go." Okay. And I went, and and met a lot of interesting people, and obviously a lot of celebrities.
Sure, of course.
I mean, you look around, and one after another, not only other people on the list, but as I said, also other people. I think they used it again to bring the sponsors there, but also to give it more visibility. They would bring in the typical guest who, like Martha Stewart at the time, who was was in the limelight very much around that time. People like that to bring it more visibility, and then they had some musical guests and different things.
Yeah. So was Elliot Spitzer there?
He wasn't.
He wasn't. Man, they and he wrote your blurb, but you didn't even get to meet him. Or did you end up meeting him?
I've never met him. No.
Oh wow, how funny!
No. And then he got his own problems, and then
yes, well, you recount that in the book. I was living in New York at the time, and I just you talk about a media firestorm. Like, it was just in New York, it was just unreal. That was a crazy time in New York. I mean, because then the crisis happened just shortly after that. So.
I think sort of the most curious thing that happened at that event was John Mayer. Oh yeah, was one of the musical guests, and I was standing there looking at the crowd, and he was a little further over. He looked really cool, had a different type of tuxedo on.
Right.
And I thought to myself, it's something familiar with it, and I thought, he looks a little lost here. Should I just go over to him and chat with him? And but I never did, and I sort of I regret not doing that, because I could have had this coolest conversation with no one else caring about the two of us.
He's a very good. He's a very good guitar player. He's a very good guitar player.
And some of his music is really good. I mean, he got a song a couple of years ago called "New Light," which is really a favorite of mine.
Oh wow! I've only seen him because he subbed for Jerry Garcia in the Dead and Company. Yeah, that's when I've seen him. Well, Dr. Erik Lie, thank you so much for talking to me. This has been fun. I hope you had fun.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was great.
Best of luck with the book.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate the plug so much.
Oh yeah, you bet.
So,
okay, there you go. Dr. Erik Lie. What a nice guy. I bet he's a great professor. Again, one more time, the book is Catching Cheats, Everyday Forensics to Unmask Business Fraud. I enjoyed it. I got a few pages left, but pick it up wherever you get books. A couple of things that we didn't get to. First, I think, something that was pitched to us, and Erik and I didn't really talk about it, but the role of journalists and academics in the reporting of fraud. And we've talked about this in prior episodes. And I think the first time we ever really discussed it was with Professor Dan Taylor of the Wharton School. It's like episode 12 or something like that. And I put it in the show notes. But he referred to it as the privatization of enforcement. And it's this idea that people like journalists and short sellers and academics like Dan and Erik, they help root out fraud because, our federal, state, and local governments, the enforcement mechanism within our governments can't possibly pursue every case, right? They can't follow up on every tip. They just can't do it all. They're constrained resource-wise. And so when somebody like Erik puts something in their lap, law enforcement has a much easier time. They essentially have a roadmap for a particular issue. In this case, it was backdating of stock options. And it's not perfect, obviously. You heard Erik and I talking about Harry Markopolos trying to tell the SEC about Bernie Madoff. And for a multitude of reasons, the SEC did not look into Bernie Madoff and did not pursue it until it was far too late. And that, went badly. And, it's just one of those things where the I guess if you think about this privatization of enforcement, it's not easy. Like these academics and journalists and short sellers, they're essentially whistleblowers from outside of the company, right? They call attention to stuff they think is wrong or illegal. And these people are not celebrated. Okay. They are not heralded as heroes when they first come out. They are relentlessly criticized and undermined by the company and their executives and their legal and PR teams that they just throw at them. They have legions of these professionals who attack them. And so that they can continue on, doing whatever it is that they're doing until the shit hits the fan. So like in the case of Madoff or Enron or FTX or Theranos, whatever, it's just too late. People are already hurt. They're devastated. Sometimes people even die. It's terrible. So I think in Erik's case, I think it was interesting and also good to hear that he kind of, he's not a traditional whistleblower, right? Like he was an academic, found something interesting, contacted the SEC, and that kind of got the ball rolling. So he was kind of unscathed. People weren't threatening his life or, threatening his well-being or people weren't saying, don't go to the University of Iowa because, that Dr. Lie is there. None of that was happening, which I was pleased to hear. And his work, had a pretty big impact. I don't think we mentioned it, but more than 130 companies were ultimately investigated and 70 executives lost their jobs. And the Wall Street Journal won a Pulitzer Prize for public service for their series on all this stuff. And so that's a big deal. There is definitely an impact there. And you might be saying, okay, you're listening to me and you're being like, well, what about the corporate executives that lost their jobs and didn't deserve to? And okay, that doesn't change the fact. I would say that it doesn't change the fact that A, these are rich and powerful people, executives at public companies, and we should want those people to be accountable for their actions. I don't know what kind of society you want to live in, but I'm not really interested in letting those people just get away with whatever they want. Okay. And I think if nothing else, even though like the criminal aspect of it, the criminal prosecution of it was a mixed bag, right? it brought transparency to a practice that even if it wasn't strictly illegal in every instance, it was being concealed, right? And Erik talked about that too. He's like, if this is all harmless, then why not just do it out in the open, right? And so it took his work and his co-researchers' work and, you know, further work from the reporters at the Journal and elsewhere, where they said, hey, this is going on and it's not happening in plain sight. Maybe it should happen in plain sight, or maybe it shouldn't happen at all. And I guess if you're okay with that, then you're probably also okay with some other things that, I don't know, I guess I would have some questions about. So maybe you need to talk to someone. Maybe you need a friend. That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe you need some friends. Anyway, that's it for this episode. And remember, if your stock options always seem perfectly timed, then either the calendar is your co-conspirator or you're Biff Tannen. Email us comments, complaints, story ideas, whatever you got. Email us at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com. Oh My Fraud is created, written, produced, and hosted by me, Caleb Newquist. Zach Frank is my co-producer, audio engineer, and music supervisor. Laura Hobbs designed our logo. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts. If you listen on Earmark, get some CPE while you're doing that. Listening there. If you listen on Earmark, you can earn CPE. Join us next time for more avarice, swindlers, and scams from stories that will make you say, oh my fraud.